Welcome to an episode of Find Your Voice, a movement led by yours truly, Aaron Dew, a guy who has overcome crippling anxiety, adversity, and difficulty like so many of you in life, whose main goal now is to help you combat your excuses, take control of your life, write your own story, and most importantly, find your voice. So now, without further ado, I welcome the host of the show himself, Mr. Aaron Dew.
What's going on, people? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Find Your Voice. My name is Aaron, and as always, I am the host of the show. So today I am bringing you Kimberly JoNell, somebody who halfway through the interview, you're going to actually hear me say, this is the greatest 3 minutes that I've ever experienced so far on Find Your Voice. Now, maybe that is because it's something that resonated with me somewhat more than maybe it will with yourselves. But what I will say is that 3 minutes completely changed the way that I see people and the way that I now carry out my life. And again, this is what I'm now trying to move this show a little bit more towards, because I'm very conscious that we can all get inspired and motivated by hearing all these stories of people overcoming adversity and going through the trials and tribulations, but still remaining positive and still persevering. But what I want to start to do now is try and ask each of my guests a couple of tips, a couple of things that we can take away. So last week you heard the incredible Taylor give us the clear message, and that was fantastic. And in fact, I've actually been doing that for the last 2 weeks, and Kimberly drops her own nuggets, and these nuggets are absolutely incredible. And I would just want to say once again my gratitude to Kimberly for taking time out of her day. I certainly learned so much and realised that this personal development journey that I'm on, I have so much further to go, but it's beautiful, it's exciting, and I'm really enjoying the process. And I hope all you guys that have come along on the journey as well are enjoying it too. So without further ado, let's get this interview on the way. Okay, so firstly, I just want to thank Kimberly for taking time out of her day to come on our show today and be kind enough to share her story. She is actually her podcaster herself, a business owner, a trauma specialist, which is actually something I'm really interested to hear more about, and a community outreach and youth health educator. So very excited for this opportunity. She's on the other side of the world actually, so we are connecting via Skype, which is fantastic, and this is kind of the thing that podcasting can bring to the surface. So before we begin, Kimberly, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm awesome. Just excited to be here and an opportunity to talk with you and the rest of your listeners. Thank you so much for taking the time and having me here today. I appreciate you, Aaron.
You're very welcome, and thank you too as well for taking time out of your day. So it's quite early
You're
for me.
welcome.
It's 10 o'clock here in the UK, and apparently it's even early for you. So bless you for having to deal with me rambling on in the morning. So
Sure, I'm a morning person.
luckily for you, so am I. So hopefully this will be plain sailing. I think it's going to be important for my listeners to get to know your story a little bit from yourself. So if you wouldn't mind, Kimberly, if you could kind of just give us, I suppose, a summary of your life, some things about you, and basically what brings you here today.
Thank you. Sure. So I grew up in a small town outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, Coleraine Township. And both of my parents lived in the household with me. My dad was a truck driver. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. And essentially, I had a pretty interesting childhood. I went back and forth between Louisiana during my summers and didn't really have a lot of extended family in the city where we lived. Only child. So that definitely provided a lot of insight for me growing up in terms of spending a lot of time alone. And I think it has developed a lot within me where I'm pretty self-dependent in terms of with my self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my childhood friends I'm still very close to now, but there were a lot of experiences I had throughout my childhood and teenage years, which brought a lot of curiosity for me into the things that I'm interested in now. I particularly had several relatives in my life who had special needs. And growing up in the 1980s, you really did not have a lot of explanation or information available as to what special needs was, what developmental delays were. And throughout my high school years, I began to read up a lot more about it. I had a cousin in particular that had autism.
Mm-hmm.
And so I developed an interest in that. And I eventually started studying speech pathology in college. And I found out from that field that we work with individuals who have autism. We work with individuals who have other developmental delays. And then we also serve children who have articulation delays, language delays, stuttering, all of those different facets in childhood. There's other realms of speech pathology as well. So part of my background in that is from some of the early experiences and exposures I had with people who had developmental delays or cognitive delays. So that was a big passion of mine early on. I'm passionate about electronics, and if anybody follows my Instagram page, they'll see that I'm usually into a lot of different things. But I enjoy anything dealing with technology. Being here for 40 years now, I have observed so many revolutionary things that have been brought to the into the space with regards to technology advancement, the internet, and now we're evolving into a lot of other things in terms of digital currency. I was just reading an article last night about autonomous vehicles. So I'm just a very curious person. Being an only child, I didn't really have a lot of friends early on, and I spent a lot of time by myself. So curiosity just drives me. I'm incredibly grateful. I went through a lot of very difficult situations early on in life. Um, I witnessed a violent incident in my early 20s, which shaped a lot of things for me. I had a very close friend of mine in my early 20s that was killed. So that shaped a lot for me as well. During my last year of college, um, actually, right before after graduation from college, my family endured Hurricane Katrina, which was a massive hurricane that impacted the Louisiana and Gulf Coast area of the United States. And throughout that process, I lost everything I had because most of my things were in Louisiana at the time, and I was living in a different state. So I had to endure loss several times throughout my life. And then 2 years later, both of my parents passed away unexpectedly.
So sorry to hear that.
Oh, well, those challenges are things that so many of us have to go through. And and back to that, just with my parents, that was a huge motivator for me as well in terms of getting into the mental health field. Because I did have a lot of observation throughout my childhood with people in my family who struggle with mental health issues. And at that time, no one really gave it a label, but you kind of just observe things that were happening around you. And then also observing things that happened within myself. As a teenager, I struggled a lot with anxiety. I struggled a lot with depression. I think that was around the first time in my life, and maybe around 17 or 18, when I really started to feel what depression felt like. And so as I got older, I really began to try to understand more about it. And it wasn't until after my parents passed away that I went to therapy. And it really, I mean, I'm a huge advocate for therapy for people now. So that brought me into the mental health realm of where I am now with helping people in the community outreach with trauma. And I've taken mindfulness training to try to assist people with that area of their life as well. So I'm all over the place, but I have many, many passions, and it's what keeps me going, just being able to provide something of value to the world.
Wow, what a story. So you've definitely exceeded my expectations already, and there's so many things that actually I want to pick out from that story. So firstly, I just love your attitude, because for somebody who's endured so much loss, not just only with your friend but your parents, which I send my deepest condolences for. You have such a brilliant attitude that you are grateful for the difficult situations in your life. And this is literally, it's almost like if I had to think of a perfect guest to have on my show, Kimberly, you would be that guest, because I want people to realize that the cards that we're dealt in life, we can't really choose them. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. And it's about having to overcome that adversity and almost use that adversity as a gift. And you've taken on all these obstacles in your life, and now what you're doing is you're serving others and you're fulfilling yourself, your happiness. And I just love that about you, that you've seen, for instance, your cousin who's suffered with autism, and you've said, I need to understand this a little bit better, and you've dived into that topic, and now you're trying to make a difference for people through your speech pathology that you mentioned. And I like that you're all over the place. I love that, because for some people it's quite common for them to kind of think that they need to be an expert in one field or kind of stick to one lane. I'm a little bit like yourself. I am very chaotic. My mind is all over the place. I am into property on one side. I'm into podcasting to inspire the world on one place. I am also an advocate of children struggling. So my younger brother has autism as well, and I was a social worker in my past life. So there's a lot of things I can resonate with you. Even with the depression, my mom suffers with depression, so I'm trying to start a social enterprise to raise awareness. So I wish I had more of me or more of you, actually, because you have so much more awareness than me, that we could almost, in the short amount of time that we have in this world, make such a positive difference. And I mean, even the Hurricane Katrina, that was big news over here in the UK as well. And to have experienced that and actually spoken to somebody who's lived that. I mean, it's one thing seeing it on the television, and if you wouldn't mind, because it's quite a unique topic, could you just maybe run through that period of what it was like in terms of how you were feeling and what you had to do?
Oh, absolutely. For me, I graduated from college in May of 2005. I was attending a college in Louisiana, New Orleans, and I actually had an apartment in East New Orleans. I received a job offer to move to Georgia. And 2 weeks after I packed up my storage unit and just packed up probably a suitcase full of belongings and drove to Atlanta, Katrina hit, but all of my family and friends were still there. The first thing I could think of in terms of to describe my emotions was powerless. I had a friend who was a nurse in one of the hospitals in the uptown area of New Orleans. She was trapped in the hospital. I had family members who were trapped in the lower ninth ward. I remember being at work because I was working as a speech pathologist at the time, and I'm sitting in my office texting my friend who was a nurse in the hospital after the hurricane had hit, the levees had broke and the water had flooded the city. Her phone was literally the only phone on that floor in her hospital. They had no electricity, no power. I was texting her and telling her what was happening because they had no idea that the levees had broke. They knew the hurricane hit. They were out of power. And she was in the hospital where a lot of people died because a lot of the hospital patients who did not have power for the hospital equipment. It was an ordeal that I will never, ever forget. It taught me so much about just not taking things for granted, and also being okay with things being out of your control. But that particular situation with Katrina meant so much for me because I watched so many people lose so much more. I lost physical possessions, but I watched people that lost their whole community. I had family members who lost neighbors who drowned. One of my mother's childhood friends drowned in Katrina, and she didn't find out until 4 months later. His name popped up on a list. And so that contributed to a lot of depression for her. And she actually passed away 2 years after Katrina. But the stress of that situation, and to watch even all these years later, the post-traumatic stress that so many people in that city and in that region experienced and never still yet received support or have been provided any type of mental health resources to help them with that. I'm very passionate about trauma. Because it's something that is in the body. The body, there's a book out that I read about 4 or 5 years ago called The Body Keeps the Score.
Absolutely,
and I think of that all the time with Katrina in terms of, or any natural disaster around the world, when things are not provided for people to work through that trauma, or when people are not educated on how trauma shows up, it impacts so much. So for me, that situation was life-changing for my entire family. But for me to witness that, for me to be in contact with people who were actually on the ground and did not have access to water or food and no idea what was happening, it was literally just an out of body experience. It really was.
It sounds absolutely terrifying, and I hope the listeners who have just heard that emotional story don't wait for catastrophe or a disaster like Hurricane Katrina to be grateful for all of the things that we do have. Fortunately, I haven't experienced all of the adversities that are possible, and when I hear it from yourself, it just makes me so much more grateful for the little things that I have as well, even more so than I already have. And you said something that was really powerful, and it was being okay with the things being out of your control. And as simple as that sentence is, I just feel that we all struggle with that.
Yes.
and we let them consume us in the day, and then that affects our emotions and our behavior and the way we treat our friends and our families. And it's something that I'm definitely trying to be more mindful of. I think you touched on it previously. It's about mindfulness, and the body keeps a score is it's something I actually heard about 6 months ago, and it really made sense to me. And I've seen people who have been through trauma or who have been through hurt, similar to yourself, and your body does take a toll because the physiology, although we might not see it externally, internally, is damaging us. So I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit, Kimberly, if you don't mind. But
No, go ahead. I can handle it.
fantastic. Well, you've handled much worse, so a simple question for myself should be fine. But if you could just give, say, one tangible tip to somebody, whether it is something as simple as just trying to be okay with things being out of your control, just something of somebody experiencing some level of adversity or trauma in that moment, what tip could you just help somebody with?
A tip that I could help someone with, my biggest thing now with the teenagers that I work with is just self-awareness, body awareness, being more aware of what's going on inside of your body. What are you feeling? How are you breathing? What are you thinking of? I truly believe that, we manifest our thoughts, and our body gives us feedback on everything that we transmit, whether it's verbal, emotional, energetic, visual. We all process that. We process it differently, but to be just really self-aware, that is the most important thing that I have learned in the years of my life recently. I
Hmm.
haven't always been self-aware. Maybe I have, and I didn't have a label for it, but just to be self-aware.
Yeah.
Um, Knowing yourself,
Mm.
and being okay with that, and then also, but not judging yourself in that same breath, but just really knowing yourself, and having your boundaries, um, being compassionate with yourself. We all have struggles, we all have problems, but not focusing on the problems as much. Shifting your mindset, that's big too. That's a really big thing too. But self-awareness for me is powerful. It has worked at any age. Self-awareness can be obtained. It's not limited to any certain stage of the journey.
That's a fantastic answer. I knew you'd give us some gold information there. So thank you for that. And
I hope it helps someone. I really do. It just has changed my life.
absolutely, I think it adds so much value. And one thing that I do try and do, and as you said it, it reminded me to do it again, was to be aware. So I almost sat up as you were talking just to kind of control my breathing again, proper breathing. I then became self-aware of my body. So the sensation of my feet touching the floor and my hands resting on my thighs and little things like that. I think we go through life and we're almost so reactive that we tend to forget all of that. And then you touched on
Yes.
something else that was so beautiful, which was not judging yourself and being compassionate with yourself. And I'm probably the worst for this because I will beat myself up over the most trivial things. Yet, if my friends or my family were to do the same thing, I would almost put an arm around their shoulder. And then sometimes I sit there and I think, why can't I talk to myself the way that I talk to others? And I think I would be living in a much better place. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, but I sometimes feel that we are our own worst enemies at times. So I think that's a fantastic answer,
Yes.
and we should all try and become more self-aware. Have you got any recommendations in terms of books or courses, or is it something that maybe you can offer the listeners?
Oh my goodness, there are so many books that I've read, but again, there's one thing to read it, but to actually put it into practice and make it practical in your daily living. Um, I don't really know of any books that teach self-awareness. It's something that I have just more psychology behind it than anything. I've read a lot of self-help books over the years, but really understanding human behavior and psychology, reading books about psychology has been tremendous for me. I took psychology in college as a minor, so I had a lot of exposure to human development, but now that I'm out of college, I still continue to feed my brain with things to help me better understand sociology and psychology and human behavior. Um, I would like to say just search anything with self-awareness on the internet, find people on social media who are interested in that, look up hashtags about self-awareness. I talk about it a lot on my Instagram page. Um,
I was
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just going to say, Kimberly, or better yet, follow you on your Instagram.
Yes, I do. I tap on it a lot in my social media platform. I really do, because I don't think that people are familiar with that term enough. And again, someone could be 80 years old and not self-aware. It really is a way of being. And so many people, like you said, are reactive or just going through life through autopilot, and they're not really in tune with who they are and how they respond to the world and beings. And a lot of people have sensitivities. Anxiety is something that many people suffer with, but anxiety is also triggered by a lot of sensitivity issues, things in the environment. Some people are very sensitive to energy. So it really makes a difference, once you are aware of who you are and how you respond to life, and then navigate from that space of understanding yourself.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for
You're
sharing that.
welcome.
I think maybe this is more of an actual journey for all of us rather than just simply picking up a book and hoping that's going to solve our problems. I think it's definitely going to require some level of daily work for all of us.
Yes.
And using your own words here, that you previously mentioned that you're kind of all over the place in the things that you're doing. Could you kind of give us an insight into what a day in the life is like for you?
Oh my goodness, a day in the life. Well, I wake up extremely early. I like to operate when the world where I am is still pretty quiet. But I'm constantly learning about different things. I teach sex education. That's what I do throughout the week with high school kids in the city where I live. So I'm working on modules for the upcoming week. I am going over questions that they ask. A lot of them, I give them a little box and I pass around the class. I have 150 kids this summer that are going through my course.
Wow.
They give questions to me anonymously. And I'm not sure how it is there in London where you are, but here in the United States, sex education is not a normalized curriculum or course in public schools here. And I'm really working on changing the conversation for that because we need it. I see the feedback from the teens and the youth here in the US that they really want information. They want information about how to protect themselves. They want information about consent, understanding that. About this past week, we did negotiation skills. Those are things, life skills that none of us were ever really taught. Communication skills, getting the foundation for that started early. We both know communication skills are things that we have to evolve upon throughout life. But in the teenage years, to have the opportunity to start learning communication skills and understanding what healthy and unhealthy relationships are, and understanding the characteristics of abusive relationships. So I do that. I still provide valuable insight to people who have children with special needs, because that is still a passion of mine. Autism is still widely misunderstood. Autism is still very taboo. And there are a lot of more holistic approaches to help kids with autism. I worked in a program about 4 or 5 years ago in an autism program in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and it provided a lot of insight for me on how to approach people with autism and how to help them connect better with people that are serving them in the school system, serving them in the home, and also about them when they get older. I mean, when they get older, what space do we have available for them? What type of jobs or things that we have available in place for them? So those are things that I'm working on. Um, I also do volunteer work. I work in a nonprofit sector here. I'm helping to eliminate a lot of smoking environments where we are, because the air pollution is pretty high where we are, and we have a lot of places that still allow smoking in certain public areas where children are. Asthma is a very high incident here in the area where I am. So I'm involved in that. I'm involved in a blockchain chamber of commerce. We are also educating the world about blockchain and the things that are happening in that sector and how it's going to revolutionize things in the world with all of that. So I'm all over the place. I'm,
Wow.
I'm really just everywhere.
And you do all of this in the same 24 hours as all of us. And
You know what? Blockchain, yeah, blockchain is typically webinars. We have webinars. I can't always attend the meetings. There are meetings every day about blockchain throughout my city, but the particular chamber that I'm in, we do a lot of, similar to this Skype. A couple of minutes I'll pop in. If they have a meeting, I'll try to find out, what they're working on and how I can contribute. The sex ed courses go on during the day. I only teach for about an hour and a half because the kids are in the summer program. So I come in, I provide them what they need, and then I take questions, and then I move on. But I'm busy. And then I homeschool my daughter. So I do that too. So
wow.
yeah, I maximize my day, but I mean, it just flows. I mean, I am just so happy to be alive and to be
Of
here.
course.
So it doesn't, I never really get burned out. I have found a way to really just take it all in and focus on things that I'm passionate about. And because my intention behind everything is good, it just flows. It really does.
I love that. Actually, I want to expand on that, actually, if I may. So it feels like that's almost like your inspiration, this self-service, this selfless,
Yes.
you just giving out. And most of it is probably because of the adversities that have come in your life to make you feel so grateful. But have you always been a kind, generous person, or has life almost made you just appreciate everything you have to then go out and try and give more to the world?
I honestly, I think I've always been that way, and it had a lot to do with my parenting. My parents did everything that they could to keep me very grounded. I grew up with a lot, and even though there were some things that occurred, our parents are not perfect, but they both did their very best to make sure that I stayed grounded, and they exposed me to things where I was able to see that I was very blessed in the situation that I was in, and they always made sure that I remained humble. Um, it really had to do with my parenting. My
Absolutely.
parents, again, they were great. They had their own struggles, but they truly embodied compassion and empathy. My mother used to, when we would go to New Orleans, there were children in the neighborhood who didn't have a lot of food. I don't know what their situations were because I was probably 8 or 9 years old, but I remember she would pack food for them and give them food, and we would. She was very passionate about the elderly community and senior citizens, and she would spend time with them, and she would take me with her and do all of those things. So I grew up seeing it modeled in people in my life. And so for me, it was just natural. It was part of being human.
I love it. Your mother sounds like an incredible lady. She was
Oh, she
incredible,
was.
yeah. And again, some of those lessons there, the compassion, the empathy and stuff, I have to be very grateful as well that was instilled in me from my parents. And it's probably one of the main things, along with kindness, that I want one day when I do have children to just instill in them. I think that's a hell of a lot more important than some of the things we think are important growing up in life, like such as the results that you get on an exam, for example, or who's got the best trainers. Well, I mean, there's more important things: compassion, empathy, all of that. So that's a beautiful answer. And just on that, then, what is your intrinsic why?
You know what? I do so much and I don't expect anything in return. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. I want to see people happy. I want to see people fulfilled. I want to see people doing what they love. Throughout my life, I have observed so many people who are unhappy and who are not enjoying life. And it's saddening sometimes to see that. And there it comes from people who have gone through a lot, but just to be alive, that's just enough. It's just enough. I just don't take anything for granted. I,
I
I
love it.
I just don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I think your intent is so truthful and honest, and I'm not sure if it's something that maybe we all have to go through adversity to kind of gain that perception or that clarity. But the fact that you want to see people happy, you want to see them fulfilled and seeing them do what they love, that's literally how I try to be. I mean, I'm early in my journey. I'm still learning. I've learned so much from you just in this short amount of time that we've had together. So I'm very grateful for that. And I don't understand myself, and I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, so excuse me, but I see a lot of people, especially on social media, who pretend to have the intent that you have. Now, I can feel it from just your energy and obviously the circumstances that you've been through, that you're pure, because nobody who's that pure would go out there and selflessly wake up early, make the most of the day to be trying to make an impact in so many different areas of life where she feels that she can make an impact. But in social media today, I feel that we're also in a society where people put on this mask and then they almost try and say the right things in order to gain fame or publicity or more likes on their social media. And it really grinds my gears, because I can see straight through somebody's intent. But you touched on something that was brilliant, and it's that you don't burn out. And I think when you come from a place of inspiration and you come from a place of just pure passion, you're not going to burn out because your energy is just pure. I mean, I don't have the science behind that to back it, but I believe that, because I don't ever get burnt out when I'm working for stuff that I'm passionate about. But I feel that when I work for an organization or something where my values and ethics don't align with it, I struggle after 2 or 3 months. So I think that's a great message that you've gave in this podcast, is for people just to be honest with themselves. And again, it comes back to self-awareness. So we've kind of gone full circle here, that in life sometimes people are saying the buzzwords because they feel that's going to attract more likes and attention, whereas I'm just saying, just be yourself. There's nothing wrong if you don't want to change the world. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you're happy and you're content and you're fulfilled in your life, then by all means just live that life. But don't try and be something that you're not, because I'm certainly finding it's hard enough just being myself and trying to figure myself out rather than trying to have a second personality. So yeah, a little bit of a rant there, but I just feel that you've gave so much clarity and value that I've been able to kind of connect the dots there, and hopefully I've made a bit of sense to you as well in that.
Oh, yes, thank you. And I totally agree. You can definitely feel it. And I'm not in the business of being negative on other people, but I don't like to see people being deceived. That's a big
Absolutely.
thing for me. And that is where I said the self-awareness. I talk about that with my teenagers, about being manipulated. I said, you have to be so in tune with yourself where you can see it coming a mile away. I said, it's a different game in this world now. There's a lot of illusions that pretend to be the truth. And you have to be on top of that, and you have to trust yourself. And if something doesn't feel right, if something doesn't resonate, then don't force it. Don't, try to make it feel good in order to go with the flow. But you're right. You can sense it. I'm the same way. And it used to trigger me. It really did. But I feel that when you're not operating from a space of integrity or a space of intent, eventually it catches up with you. It always does. Yeah, it
Absolutely.
always does.
I think I'm realizing that. I think people who are trying to go for the short-term gains will
Short
eventually.
term, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But what was incredible there, Kimberly, was as you said manipulation, I literally wrote that word down. So I'm taking notes to try. So you're hitting the nail on the head exactly with my thought process. And I see in a society where people are taking advantage of people, because one, I see people who are already disadvantaged anyway through the cards that they've been dealt in life, and it just really upsets me that there's people out there then trying to exploit these people and some by almost trying to sell people that they're missing a key ingredient, for example. So you're hearing people selling courses for like £2,000 because if you really want to be successful, you need this one thing, so you need to come and buy my course. And I'm just like, I could talk about it for ages, and I'm trying to think that we need to, like yourself, is try to be more persuasive rather than trying to manipulate people. But I think if people were self-aware and use their gut intuition, like you just said, I think we'd definitely be in a better place. But yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
And you're welcome. And just to add on that, people prey on insecurity. And anytime that someone can make another person feel as if they are not enough, then they open that door where they can say, you're not enough. Here's what you need from me in order to, and that I learned when I worked in the nonprofit sector. I observed that a lot. People would go into underserved communities and they would do the photo ops. They would go in under the agenda that they were there to serve and to help, but it was really just for their own personal gain. It was either for notoriety. and the people in the community would begin to not trust. We would go in and we would try to provide information and resources. They would say, well, how long are you going to be here? Because most people come in, they collect data from us, and they leave. And so I saw that in real world experience. And then to see it on the internet now, on social media, it's so much easier for people. Everybody's looking for something. And then those who are preying on people, they are out here doing it with expectation of something in return, whether it's money, whether it's likes, whether it's followers. But it's not coming from a space of, I am here to provide value for you, and I don't want anything from you. And like you said, the short term, it's a short term objective, but it's the long term, because I believe we're all interconnected. And if we can provide value for someone, it plants a seed that can alter their life choices in their lifetime. And it shouldn't require anything from someone else. Just the energy exchange is enough. That's enough.
Absolutely. Kimberly, this is exactly why I love this podcast. And from a selfish perspective, that last 3 minutes, now I've done 28 shows, that's probably the best 3 minutes that I've been fortunate to have heard. And maybe because it resonates with me on a personal level. So you said something and I got a bit emotional, and the hairs on my arm stood up, because you said people prey on insecurity. And I feel in the last 12 months, somebody who I considered very close to me prey on my insecurity from my anxiety, my shyness. And it was almost led to believe that any of the success that I have in the future was down to this one individual. Yet in hindsight, when I think, I've had to put all that work in. I've had to overcome my fears. I've had to go and try and do public speaking and then embarrass myself because the words don't come out. And I've had to put all those reps and those hours and those sleepless nights. But there was a time when I wasn't as self-aware or realizing my own value that I was bringing to the world. And I did believe that it was all down to this one individual. And it was incredible how they... I suppose I was being manipulated, to be honest. And I only share this on not to kind of broadcast this as this individual. I'm trying to broadcast this to people who may be going through the same situation, because I now sit here and I feel hurt and I feel pain, that I feel that individual has lost probably one of the most loyal people in the world. And that's one thing that I will always try and be, is just a very loyal person to people. Even myself on this journey, and I've been doing personal development for 6-7 years, I'm still learning every day. So on a selfish reason, that really resonated with me massively, and I hope it does for the listeners as well, because I'm sure we're all going to be coming into contact with people who we genuinely think have our best intentions at heart, but deep down their intent is not as pure. And I truly believe that it all comes down to your intent.
Yes, it does. It does.
So thank you for that. And I'm going to just flip the script now. So I want to ask you, having been through so much adversity and seen so much in your incredible story, and you could talk about this for days, it's just a shame that you're on the other side of the world, but what actually scares you in this moment? What's your biggest fear?
To be honest, I almost want to say I don't have any fears, but I think for me, there's an inner urgency just to make sure that I do everything that I can in terms of my mission here before I leave here. And I don't really know when that time will be, but other than that, I don't really have any fears. I'm not afraid of death. I'm not afraid of failure. I'm not afraid of being embarrassed. I've shared a lot of personal things on my Instagram page that most people probably would not share out of fear of judgment. I'm not afraid of judgment. I'm not really afraid of anything. And I think that's what my fuel is. It's like no one can say anything that can really take me out of my space. And it empowers me that I don't really have any fears of anything. I haven't always been this way though. So no, it has been a journey to get this. I used to be afraid of a lot, but again, I think the experiences that I've gone through have basically all of my fears that I had to face them. So
No, thank you for sharing that. And thank you actually for mentioning that you wasn't always like this, because I think when somebody, and hopefully people after this show will they'll definitely gravitate towards you and follow you. They might just think that it's okay for Kimberly. Kimberly's got it all figured out. But what people don't realize is everyone has a story, and everyone becomes the way they are because of whatever's happened in those previous chapters. And that's kind of one of the premises behind the show. And if I'm completely honest now, you've got me intrigued, because I'm kicking myself that I didn't do more stalking into your personal Instagram. So it's my own, I'll put my hands up, because I think Instagram, we look at it and we look at pretty pictures. If it's not attracting us in the first 2 or 3 seconds, we kind of scroll away. So I'm very interested now to kind of go back into your posts, and I hope the listeners do as well, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot that we can all learn from that. So definitely food for thought for myself. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, there's a ton of information. I've been on Instagram since 2011, and believe it or not, the first 3 or 4 years of Instagram, my page was totally private. I used to be a very private person, and then one day something came to my mind, and it said, you're going to have a lot that you need to do, and you're going to have to reach a lot more people, and opening your account is the only way that people will be
Absolutely.
able to get to know you, and that you can network and talk to people and really connect with other people. And I just always been a very private person, and I'm totally on the different end of the spectrum now. There's nothing that I won't share about my life. For the most part, I'm pretty much open. But
Absolutely.
yeah, there's a ton of information there, and I hope it can provide some value for people. And you can kind of watch my journey along the way over these years as well. Thank you.
And that's the beautiful thing about it. And I feel now it's definitely your duty to spread your light and spread your message as well. So if I ever see you doing anything in private, I'm going to tell you off myself personally. make sure that you put it out into the world, because it's
Yes.
enlightening. Definitely.
Thank you.
Okay. Kimberly, we're actually at the part of the show now which I like to call the fun part of the show, where I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you all sorts of weird and wonderful questions.
Okay.
So we're going to start in 3, 2, 1. What did you eat for breakfast?
Nothing yet.
Okay. Your biggest gift?
The ability to communicate.
The ability to fly or be invisible?
Fly.
Would you rather have a rewind button or a pause button on life?
A pause button.
Money or fame?
That's a tough one. Money or fame? Because both provide impact. I would have to say money, because I could do things anonymously and still make an impact without the fame. I don't want the fame.
I love that. Your proudest moment?
Becoming a mother.
Your favorite food?
Pineapple.
Netflix or YouTube?
Oh man, YouTube, hands down.
Okay. Your number one goal this year?
Connect with more people that are international.
Your favorite TV show ever?
You know what? I was just talking about that yesterday. I liked Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. There was a lot of great value and wisdom in that.
Would you rather know how you would die or when you would die?
When?
Your favorite hobby?
Traveling.
Books or movies?
Books.
If you could sit with one person in the world for an hour, who would it be?
Elon Musk. I'd love to pick his brain.
Your worst fear as a child?
Was actually something happening to my parents. That was my worst fear.
And finally, if you could abolish one thing in the world, what would it be?
I would abolish anything that would cause harm to children. I think, I working with teenagers and knowing that many of them are going through a lot or have been through a lot as a result of other people. If I could abolish any type of harm done to children, because everything originates in childhood.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. We are actually at the end of
You're
that
welcome.
round. Yeah, so thank you. Brilliant. Okay, so just a couple of more questions, Kimberly, if I may. And the next one that I always like to ask my guests is about reflection. So I'm a firm believer that hindsight is a wonderful thing, in terms of it can teach us ways that we can get to places quicker, with less heartache, or easier. But what I want to know is, if you could, knowing everything that you know now, go back to a time where maybe you were a little bit uncertain or not clear of where you were going in life, and whisper something in a younger Kimberly's ear, what would you say?
I would tell a younger Kimberly to trust herself. Yeah. I would tell her to trust herself, because there was a time when I would listen to what everyone else was saying, my parents, my friends, And this was before social media, so I can only imagine
Mm,
the feedback that people get now from strangers and from people that they don't know. But to trust myself, and it's
absolutely.
going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay.
Love that. Love that. Thank you. And sadly, that actually does bring us to the last question. So, if in 150 years' time science fails to save us and all that exists is a book, and this book, it's about you, it's about your life and all the weird and wonderful things that you've contributed to life and everything about you, basically. Firstly, what would the title of the book be? And secondly, what would the blurb at the back tell us about you?
Mm. The title would be Everlasting Touch.
Mm,
And the blurb in the back would have to be that the legacy is that compassion, kindness,
mm,
connection, um, empathy, those and love, those are the things that carry that carry throughout human civilization. It's intrinsic of who we are. It's wired in our DNA,
mm.
and that's the touch that it goes through our children. It goes through us through people that we connect with. I feel it through you and through you and I. It's the human value.
Absolutely. How would you want to be remembered though as a person? Like, what would you want the first thing that when somebody mentions your name that they say, "Oh, Kimberly, yes, she is."
Sincere.
Mm,
I think sincerity is something that people cannot
mm, I love
imitate
that. Yeah.
or pretend. Sincerity, just sincerity.
Oh wow, I love that. Thank you, Kimberly. Sadly, that actually does bring us to the end of the show. It's actually been one of my favorite shows, and like I said, there's a segment in here which really touched my heart, and I've learned so much just having this 50-minute conversation with you, and I'll definitely be sure to kind of follow your journey. But what I want to do is give the audience a chance to connect with you as well, because I think you're a fascinating individual. I think you bring so much good into the world, and I think you're going to do so much more as well moving forward. So if you wouldn't mind, if you could just kind of give us the best places where people can perhaps reach out to you, connect with you, or maybe just follow your journey.
Sure, yes. I am on Instagram as Jackson K10, spelled JACKSON and the number 10. And I also have another handle on Instagram called You Are the Wealth. That's also the name of one of my businesses. And I have my podcast is called You Are the Wealth. You can find it on all of the podcast platforms as well. And yeah, that the You Are the Wealth is something that I recently created because again, the self-awareness and the self-worth is something that I believe needs to be cultivated in everyone. And yeah, that there I'm on Twitter as You Are the Wealth. Not much on Facebook, so you'll find me on Instagram or Twitter, and then I have the podcast. But those are that's enough for me. I think I spread myself too thin if I'm on everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you're doing too much anyway. Although I say that in a positive way, because everything that you're doing is obviously fantastic. So
Oh, thank you.
thank you for sharing those, Kimberly. I'll certainly add all of that information in the show notes, so I'll have the actual links there for anyone that needs to click on it. I want to once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank Kimberly for her time today, and more importantly, everyone at home, thanks for listening.
Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing as well. It's much needed. Thank you.
And remember, this podcast is absolutely free. So all we ask in return is for you to share this with a friend and drop us a 5-star review over on iTunes. Have an awesome day.